People like you need to wait over there. The words sliced through the crowded boarding area with the kind of confidence that only came from someone who believed they would never be questioned. Conversations faded. Rolling suitcases slowed. Dozens of travelers waiting near gate B22 turned toward the voice as if an invisible spotlight had suddenly switched on. Emily Carter, a gate agent wearing a neatly pressed Navy uniform, stood with one hand stretched toward the general boarding lane while staring directly at Monica Brooks. Monica didn't look like the executives who usually passed through the priority line. She wore clean white sneakers, dark jeans, a simple charcoal sweater, and carried a small black backpack over one shoulder instead of a designer handbag or expensive luggage. There was nothing flashy about her appearance, and that was entirely intentional. Emily looked Monica up and down once more before forcing a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Priority boarding is for our premium travelers and corporate partners, she said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. You'll need to move to the regular line. Several people glanced at Monica, then quietly looked away. Others kept watching, curious to see whether she would argue. Monica remained perfectly still. Her expression didn't change. She simply looked at the boarding sign hanging above the gate, then back at Emily with calm, steady eyes. My boarding group is correct, she answered in an even voice. Emily folded her arms. I'm trying to save you from being embarrassed. Please move before boarding starts. A businessman in an expensive suit stepped forward behind Monica and sighed impatiently. A young mother gently pulled her son a little closer. An older couple exchanged uncertain looks, but said nothing. The tension spread through the waiting area faster than any announcement over the airport speakers. Monica glanced around the gate for a brief second, taking in every face, every reaction, every silence. None of it surprised her. She had seen this moment before, just in different airports, different cities, different years. She slowly stepped out of the line without a single complaint, leaving enough room for everyone else to board. Emily nodded with quiet satisfaction, convinced the situation was over before it had truly begun. What no one around Gate B22 realized was that Monica had boarded hundreds of flights over the past 2 decades, not as a celebrity seeking attention or an executive demanding special treatment, but as someone who quietly observed how people treated strangers when they believed nobody important was watching. Today's flight wasn't just another business trip. It was supposed to end with the signing of one of the largest airline partnership renewals in the country, a multi-million-dollar agreement that executives on both sides had spent months preparing. Yet standing there beneath the glowing departure screens, dressed like any ordinary traveler, Monica Brooks had already learned something far more valuable than any presentation waiting at the other end of the flight. And as Emily waved the next passenger forward with growing confidence, she had absolutely no idea that the quiet woman she had just dismissed was only minutes away from making a decision that would change far more than the boarding order at Gate B22. Monica stood quietly beside the boarding lane as travelers continued to file past her, her hands resting lightly on the strap of her backpack, while the electronic display above the gate flashed the destination and departure time. She did not glance at Emily again because there was nothing left to prove in that conversation. Instead, she watched the small details that most people never noticed. She noticed which passengers received warm smiles before they even presented a boarding pass. She noticed which travelers were greeted by name after displaying elite status. She noticed how assumptions formed long before documents were ever checked. None of it required raised voices. Bias often arrived dressed as routine customer service. A few feet away, a college student looked uncertain before quietly stepping closer. "Ma'am, I think you were in the right line," he whispered. Monica offered him a small smile. "Thank you. That was kind of you." The young man hesitated, then nodded and returned to his place without another word. Across the waiting area, Emily laughed softly with another employee while occasionally glancing toward Monica as though the matter had already been settled. For Emily, this was another ordinary workday. For Monica, it was another data point. She slowly reached into her sweater pocket and removed her phone. There were no hurried movements and no signs of frustration. She selected a single contact. Jasmine Reed answered before the second ring. "Good morning, Monica." "Good morning, Jasmine." Monica replied in the same calm tone she had used all morning. "I have arrived at the gate." Jasmine immediately recognized the subtle meaning behind those words. Do you need me to begin documenting? Monica looked toward the boarding desk where passengers continued presenting identification. Not yet. Simply remain available. Understood, Jasmine answered. The executive team is already in Denver preparing for the partnership ceremony. The airline representatives confirmed everyone will be there within 2 hours. Monica's eyes remained fixed on the gate. That schedule may change. Jasmine paused for only a moment. She had worked beside Monica for almost 9 years and understood that every careful sentence carried weight. Would you like me to notify legal? Monica answered just as calmly. Only if it becomes necessary. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Around her, families discussed vacation plans while business travelers answered electronic mail and children watched airplanes taxi across the runway through the enormous windows. To everyone else, Gate B-22 looked exactly as it should on a busy Tuesday morning. Only Monica understood that the next few minutes would determine the future of a business relationship worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She had insisted on traveling alone for this inspection despite repeated objections from her executive staff. No assistants, no security, no chauffeur, no designer wardrobe that silently announced status before she ever spoke. She wanted to experience exactly what an ordinary traveler experienced because numbers on quarterly reports never revealed the whole truth. Customer satisfaction. Surveys could be polished. Executive presentations could be rehearsed. Real character appeared only when people believed there would be no consequences for their choices. Monica had built her company around that belief after spending more than 20 years proving that respect should never depend on appearance, job title, or the color of someone's skin. She had promised herself long ago that every partnership her company maintained would reflect those same values. As boarding continued, Emily glanced toward Monica once again, completely unaware that the quiet woman standing alone beside the window was not waiting for permission to board an airplane. She was waiting to discover whether the airline deserved to keep one of the most valuable partnerships it had ever earned. Olivia Grant had been quietly working the adjacent boarding podium since the first exchange, saying little while scanning boarding passes and answering routine travel questions, but something about the encounter continued to bother her. Emily had never actually scanned the woman's boarding pass before directing her away from the priority lane. That detail stayed with Olivia like a loose thread that refused to disappear. As another passenger stepped away from the counter, Olivia discreetly opened the reservation system and entered the last name she had briefly noticed on the boarding document. The screen refreshed almost instantly. Her eyes widened. The reservation carried an executive corporate designation she had only seen a handful of times during her 3 years with the airline. Multiple internal notes appeared beneath the itinerary, each marked with a level of clearance that required special handling. Olivia blinked once, convinced she had entered the wrong record, then verified the confirmation number again. The information did not change. She looked toward Monica, who remained standing quietly near the window overlooking the runway, watching aircraft taxi beneath a bright morning sky as though nothing unusual had happened. Olivia glanced back at Emily, who was laughing with Supervisor Mark Sullivan while discussing the boarding sequence. Neither of them appeared interested in verifying anything beyond the assumption they had already made. Olivia hesitated before speaking. "Emily," she called softly, "could you take another look at this reservation?" Emily barely turned her head. "It has already been handled. I think there may be additional information attached to the account." Mark stepped closer, folding his arms. "Is there a problem?" Olivia lowered her voice. "The reservation has executive partner status. I think we should verify everything before we continue." Mark frowned without looking at the screen. If she qualified, she would have presented herself like every other executive traveler. Olivia looked back at the monitor, then at Monica once again. "The system says she did." Mark dismissed the comment with a quick shake of his head. "The system is not always updated. Continue boarding." Olivia remained still for a moment before returning to her workstation, but the uneasy feeling only grew stronger. Nearby, a middle-aged passenger wearing a navy sport coat had witnessed enough of the earlier exchange to approach Monica with quiet concern. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I believe the young employee is trying to tell them something." Monica smiled gently. "I noticed. Are you going to say anything?" he asked. Monica looked toward the boarding desk without the slightest trace of anger. "Not yet. Sometimes people reveal the truth about themselves when no one interrupts them." The passenger nodded slowly, unsure what to make of the answer, yet somehow reassured by the calm confidence behind it. Across the gate area, another traveler lowered the phone she had quietly been using to record the interaction, uncertain whether she should continue. The atmosphere had changed. What had first appeared to be a simple misunderstanding now felt heavier, as though everyone nearby sensed an invisible line separating routine procedure from something far more serious. Olivia took one final look at the reservation screen. The corporate designation remained exactly where it had been from the beginning, untouched and unmistakable. She inhaled quietly, knowing she could either ignore what she had discovered or speak up again despite the risk of being dismissed herself. As the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal once more, she made her decision and stepped away from her station, determined that facts deserved at least one honest voice before assumptions became irreversible. Monica remained exactly where she was, her gaze fixed beyond the glass as another aircraft eased toward the runway with quiet precision. The engines outside hummed like distant thunder, but inside Gate B-22 the loudest sound had become whispered assumptions. Emily crossed her arms and looked toward Mark Sullivan with growing confidence. "She is still standing here," she said. "If she is not going to board correctly, we may need to involve airport operations." Mark nodded as though the decision required no further thought. "Ma'am," he called toward Monica, "if you are finished with your questions, I need you to move away from the priority boarding area so we can continue assisting our passengers." Monica slowly turned to face him. "I have not interrupted anyone," she answered calmly. "I am simply waiting." "Then wait farther back," Mark replied. "You are creating unnecessary confusion." Monica studied his face for a quiet moment before stepping several feet away without protest. She did not argue over the request. She did not defend herself. She simply complied, the same way she had learned to do years before, when proving a point mattered more than winning an argument. For an instant, the terminal around her seemed to fade. She remembered another airport almost 20 years earlier. She had been 26 years old, carrying a single rolling suitcase after closing the biggest contract of her young career. A customer service representative had questioned whether she belonged in the business class line even after seeing her ticket. She remembered standing there while other passengers walked past without hesitation. She remembered promising herself that success would never erase moments like that. It would only give her the ability to change them for someone else. The memory disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Monica returned to the present with the same steady expression. Nearby, the businessman who had spoken with her earlier watched the exchange unfold with visible discomfort. "This does not seem right," he quietly told another traveler. A woman holding a coffee nodded. "She has been respectful this entire time." Their words never reached Emily, who remained convinced she was protecting company policy. Olivia, however, heard every sentence. She stepped toward Mark once more, determination replacing hesitation. "Sir," she said carefully, "I verified the reservation twice. The account includes executive partner credentials. We should stop and review this before we continue." Mark sighed impatiently. "Olivia, boarding is already delayed enough. We are moving forward." "But what if the record is accurate?" she asked. Mark answered without looking at the screen. "Then someone at corporate can explain it later." Olivia looked toward Monica again. The quiet woman standing near the window showed no sign of frustration, only patience that somehow made the entire situation feel even heavier. Monica reached into her pocket and glanced at the time before locking her phone again. She knew the signing ceremony was drawing closer by the minute. She also knew every decision being made at this gate was revealing something no executive presentation ever could. Respect was never tested when everything went smoothly. It was tested when someone believed another person had nothing to offer. Monica drew one slow breath and made a silent decision she had hoped would never become necessary. If the next choice made at Gate B-22 reflected the same pattern as every choice before it, today's itinerary would end very differently than anyone representing the airline could possibly imagine. Monica slipped her phone from her pocket one more time and looked at the dark screen for a brief second before pressing a single contact. Jasmine Reed answered immediately, her voice steady and professional. "I am here." Monica never raised her voice. "It is time." There was a short pause on the other end before Jasmine replied, "Understood. Shall I begin the review protocol?" Monica looked toward the boarding counter where Emily was welcoming passengers with the same confident smile she had never offered Monica. Yes, suspend the signing ceremony until further notice. Notify legal, procurement, corporate compliance, and the executive partnership office that I am initiating a live service review. Jasmine did not ask questions. She never needed to. The notifications will be sent within 60 seconds. Would you like me to connect the executive committee? Monica answered calmly. Not yet. Let them wait until I confirm my findings. She ended the call and returned the phone to her pocket as though nothing significant had happened. To everyone standing nearby, she appeared to be another traveler checking messages before boarding. No one could hear the chain of events that had already begun hundreds of miles away. Inside Meridian Global Holdings headquarters, conference rooms that had been prepared for celebration were suddenly transformed into review sessions. Attorneys stopped reading contracts and opened incident reporting files. Procurement executives paused the final approval documents for the airline renewal agreement. Compliance officers began requesting internal records connected to customer experience standards. No one panicked because Monica almost never activated a review during a scheduled partnership event. When she did, everyone understood that every detail mattered. Back at Gate B22, Olivia watched Monica quietly place her phone away. She could not explain why, but the calm confidence she carried made the entire situation feel completely different. Emily, however, remained convinced the matter had already been resolved. She scanned another boarding pass and smiled warmly at a frequent flyer before saying, "Thank you for your loyalty. Enjoy your flight." Olivia finally stepped beside her supervisor once more. "Mark, I really believe we should verify this reservation before the aircraft door closes." Mark exhaled slowly. "Olivia, we have discussed this already. The executive designation is authentic," she insisted. "Everything in the system matches." Mark looked at her with visible impatience. "Our responsibility is to keep boarding on schedule. Corporate records can be sorted out after departure." Olivia lowered her eyes, disappointed by the answer. Across the waiting area, the businessman who had spoken with Monica earlier quietly observed every exchange. He noticed that Monica never interrupted anyone. She never demanded special treatment. She never once mentioned her profession or questioned anyone's authority. She simply watched and listened. That silence unsettled him more than any argument could have. A woman seated near the window leaned toward him and whispered. She seemed surprisingly calm. He nodded. People who know exactly who they are rarely need to convince anyone else. Monica looked toward the departure screen one final time before shifting her attention back to the boarding counter. Every choice had now been documented. Every conversation had revealed another layer of the company's culture. This had never been about one boarding line or one employee. It was about whether respect existed only after status became visible. Somewhere inside the airline's headquarters, executives were still expecting to celebrate a renewed partnership before the afternoon ended. They had no idea that the decision was no longer waiting inside a conference room. It was standing quietly beside the window at Gate B22, watching one ordinary moment determine the future of an extraordinary business relationship with nothing more than patience, careful observation, and the quiet authority that came from never needing to announce power before it was time. The final boarding announcement echoed across Gate B22 as passengers gathered their bags and prepared to step onto the aircraft, but Monica remained exactly where she had been since the morning began. She glanced toward the boarding podium, then walked forward with the same quiet confidence that had defined every moment before it. Emily noticed her approaching and immediately sighed. "Ma'am, we have already been through this. If you are boarding, please use the correct lane." Monica stopped a few feet from the counter and gently placed a slim black business card on the podium. Emily barely looked at it before reaching for the next passenger's boarding pass. "I do not need your business card," she said. "I need you to follow instructions." Olivia's eyes drifted to the card. Instead, the moment she read the name, her breathing slowed. She looked back at the reservation on her monitor, then back at the card, and finally toward Monica. Every detail matched. There was no mistake. "Mark," Olivia said, her voice noticeably firmer than before. "You need to see this." Mark stepped over with visible impatience and picked up the card. His expression changed almost instantly. The confidence that had filled his face only seconds earlier disappeared beneath unmistakable uncertainty. Monica calmly met his eyes before speaking for the first time with complete clarity. My name is Monica Brooks. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Global Holdings. No one around the gate moved. Even the travelers waiting to board seemed to forget about the line in front of them. Monica continued in the same measured tone. My company has spent the past 8 months negotiating one of the largest corporate travel partnerships your airline has ever received. This morning, I chose to travel alone because I wanted to experience the service our employees receive when they fly on business. I intentionally dressed like any other traveler. I wanted to see whether respect depended on appearance or whether it was simply part of your culture. Emily stared at Monica in complete silence. Mark looked back and forth between the business card and the reservation screen, searching for some explanation that no longer existed. Olivia quietly turned her monitor toward him, displaying the executive designation she had tried to point out several times earlier. The businessman who had spoken with Monica stepped closer, finally understanding why she had never argued. Several nearby passengers exchanged stunned glances as the pieces suddenly fit together. Monica continued without raising her voice. No one asked additional questions before making assumptions. No one verified the reservation before directing me away. The facts were available from the beginning. They were simply ignored. Emily finally managed to speak. I did not know who you were. Monica gave a small, respectful nod. That is exactly the point. Courtesy should never depend on recognizing a title. It should be extended before you know someone's position, before you know their income, and before you know whether they can influence your career. At that exact moment, Monica's phone vibrated softly. She looked at the screen for only a second before slipping it back into her pocket. Jasmine had sent a single message. Every department was waiting. Every executive review team was assembled. Every document was prepared. Monica lifted her eyes toward the boarding counter once more. The silence surrounding Gate B22 felt heavier than the busiest airport announcement because everyone standing there understood the same thing. The conversation had just shifted from a boarding dispute to a decision that would reach far beyond a single flight. Monica unlocked her phone and placed a single call on speaker. Jasmine answered immediately, her voice calm and unmistakably prepared. Good morning, Monica. Every department is standing by. Monica never looked away from the boarding counter. Please proceed. Confirmed, Jasmine replied. Legal has suspended execution of the airline partnership agreement pending executive review. Procurement has frozen the final authorization package. Corporate compliance has opened a formal customer experience investigation based on your field assessment conducted this morning. The airline executive team has already been notified that today's signing ceremony will not move forward until the review is complete. The words settled over Gate B22 with a silence heavier than any announcement echoing through the terminal. Emily stared at Monica without speaking. Mark lowered the business card still resting in his hand, as though it suddenly weighed far more than paper ever could. Around them, passengers quietly watched the conversation unfold, many forgetting that boarding had nearly finished. Jasmine continued. The airline's vice president of corporate partnerships has requested an immediate conference call. They would like to understand the reason for the suspension. Monica answered with the same measured voice she had used since arriving at the gate. Tell them the reason is simple. Our company evaluates partners by the standards they demonstrate when they believe no executive is watching. This morning I watched. Understood, Jasmine replied. Would you like me to release your written observations? Monica nodded slightly. Yes. Include every interaction exactly as it occurred. No assumptions. No opinions. Only verified facts. Already prepared, Jasmine answered. The report includes the reservation records, boarding timeline, employee responses, and confirmation that the executive designation was visible in the system before any decisions were made. Olivia quietly closed her eyes for a brief moment, realizing that everything she had tried to explain had now become part of an official corporate record. The businessman standing nearby slowly shook his head. She gave everyone every opportunity to make this right, he murmured. Several travelers nodded in agreement. Emily finally found her voice. Please, if there is anything we can do to correct this. Monica looked at her with calm professionalism rather than anger. Every customer deserves your best service before you know who they are. That opportunity existed long before I introduced myself. Mark swallowed quietly before speaking. We should have verified the information. Monica answered with a respectful nod. Verification is not only about protecting a company. It is also about protecting people's dignity. Her phone vibrated once more. Another message from Jasmine appeared across the screen. The airline's executive office had formally acknowledged receipt of the suspension notice and requested an emergency meeting before the close of business. Monica locked the phone without responding immediately. The decision had already been made. It was no longer about punishment. It was about accountability. Outside the terminal windows, the aircraft remained at the gate while final preparations continued. Inside, the atmosphere had completely changed. The confidence that had filled the boarding counter only minutes earlier had given way to quiet reflection. Even passengers who had never spoken to Monica understood they had witnessed something much larger than a disagreement at an airport gate. They had watched a routine interaction become a lesson about respect, professionalism, and the consequences of making decisions before seeking the truth. Monica picked up her business card from the counter, slipped it back into her pocket, and waited calmly as the next chapter unfolded, while everyone around Gate B22 understood that the partnership had not been paused because a powerful executive had been inconvenienced. It had been suspended because a simple moment had revealed a standard that no successful partnership could afford to ignore. The boarding area remained unusually quiet as the final passengers waited for instructions that no longer seemed important. Monica stood with the same calm posture she had carried from the beginning, neither celebrating nor seeking an apology. She simply waited. A few moments later, Mark's company phone rang. He looked at the display, his expression tightening before he answered. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. The conversation lasted less than a minute. He spoke only a handful of words before lowering the phone. When he looked back at Monica, the certainty that had guided every earlier decision had disappeared. "Our executive office has instructed us to cooperate fully with the review," he said. Monica acknowledged him with a small nod. "That is the correct decision." Emily looked down at the boarding desk, her voice barely above a whisper. "I judged you before I knew anything about you." Monica answered without hesitation. "You judged me before you chose to know me. There is an important difference." No one around the gate spoke. The businessman who had defended Monica earlier quietly removed his boarding pass from his pocket and said, "That may be the most valuable lesson I have heard in an airport." A few nearby travelers nodded in agreement. Olivia stepped forward, taking a slow breath. "I should have spoken up sooner," she admitted. Monica smiled warmly. "You spoke when it mattered. Doing the right thing is not about being the first voice. Sometimes it is about refusing to let the last opportunity pass." Olivia's shoulders relaxed as though a weight had finally been lifted. Beyond the terminal windows, the aircraft reflected the morning sunlight while ground crews completed their final preparations. Everything outside continued according to schedule, yet everyone inside Gate B22 understood they would remember this morning far longer than the flight itself. Monica's phone vibrated once more. Jasmine's message was brief. The executive committee had unanimously agreed to continue the suspension until the airline completed an independent review and presented measurable improvements to its customer service standards. Monica read the message once before placing the phone back into her pocket. She had achieved exactly what she came to learn, not because she held authority, but because the truth had revealed itself without needing to be forced. She looked toward Emily one final time. "I sincerely hope your next customer never has to prove they deserve respect." Emily lowered her eyes and quietly replied, "Neither do I." Monica collected her backpack and walked toward the boarding bridge with the same steady pace she had maintained all morning. No applause followed her. No dramatic announcement echoed through the terminal. The silence itself carried more meaning than applause ever could. It was the silence of people reconsidering assumptions they had accepted without question. It was the silence that follows an honest lesson. As Monica disappeared down the jet bridge, the passengers slowly resumed boarding, but many glanced back at the gate one last time before stepping forward. They had arrived expecting an ordinary flight. They left with a reminder that character is measured long before titles are introduced, that professionalism begins with ordinary moments, and that genuine respect is never something earned by wealth, position, or recognition. It is something every person deserves from the very beginning. Monica never raised her voice that morning. She simply raised the standard. and that standard would travel much farther than the airplane waiting beyond Gate B-22.